Another episode of Real Life Game Changers. As always, we're in for an amazing treat. Why? Because we're going to be sharing the journey and the highs, the lows, the twists and turns of how to change the game. What is changing the game? Someone has changed an industry, their life, someone else's life, or just changed the game, changed the trajectory that they're on. So if you're watching this, and you're live, put hashtag live, and let's start tagging some people. Share it on your timeline, because what we're going to be doing by the end of this show is for the people who are watching it live, that is, we will be giving away some real life merchandise. So you will get to select whatever it is from the store that you want. To be in a chance for that, you've got to share it on your timeline and let us know in the comments that you've done that, and then tag at least 10 people that you want to give the choice. It's their choice, obviously, but give them the choice to tune in and hear about this amazing lady that I've got on this show today. So Kristina started with nothing and has built a multi-million pound portfolio. There's over 30 properties, and was adopted at 6 weeks. So some people might see this as a challenging start, starting with nothing, being adopted, but she is now a mom of 2 boys, married, and loving riding the waves of life. So any questions that you have during this, get them sent in. We'll get through as many as we possibly can. But let me introduce you. Like, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it when people come on here, spend their time and their energy to help the game changer vibe continue. So, Kristina, thank you for being here.
Oh no, it's great. And do you know, I really like doing these because I just love to talk. So this is my perfect environment.
Love it. Okay, good. So talk away. Just give us, to begin with, just give us the highlights of, like, okay, so who is Kristina? What were you like growing up, and what was a turning point where something switched on to say, yeah, I'm going to get into property?
Okay, so I would say I've always been quite motivated anyway as a person. Even like as a little girl, I I remember watching the Brit Awards and crying because for some reason I thought I should have been there. Like, I was just, I just always wanted like lots out of life. Always like had massive dreams. Never wanted an ordinary life. And then obviously that sort of led me to the stage anyway. So I went to musical theatre college at 16 and then had like an amazing career as a singer, primarily as a singer, but I danced and acted as well. And just had a really like always had like a really fun, busy, exciting life, I think is the way that I would describe it. But in terms of like my turning point for property, I had been singing all over the world, and I just got to a point actually where I am in some ways quite boring in the fact that I really need home, like I need a base. And I don't know, actually, it's only now I've started to think, is that because I'm adopted? I moved around quite a lot when I was younger. I felt quite unstable, I think. When I found out I was adopted when I was about 13, it wasn't a very good time in my life. I was being really bullied anyway. I was living in Scotland. I really didn't fit in. I was really bullied, and it coincided with the time I found out I was adopted. And the way that I described how I felt is the bricks from my wall had fallen down. I felt like everything had been pulled underneath me. So it's really actually quite funny that I've ended up being a property investor and sort of building that stability. But I think that's probably definitely influenced my life in wanting a home, somewhere safe, somewhere that I can really settle. So that didn't really work with the whole singer vibe of like me always living out of a suitcase and going from contract to contract. So I kind of did that as long as I physically could until I was like, do you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. So home for me at the time was Blackpool. And I was like, I'm just going to stay in Blackpool. I'm not going to work away. I'm not going to do the cruise ships anymore. Like, I'm going to find work here. I'd lived in London as well, and I just couldn't settle there. So came back to Blackpool and really started to invest in myself with personal development. I started network marketing. which I did really well at. But the most important thing from that really was that I started to read the books that like change your mindset.
Mm,
And that is when I discovered passive income. And the
mm.
moment I discovered passive income, I was like, I don't want any other type of money. I only want this money. I want passive income, and I just got absolutely obsessed.
So what's your version of passive income? Because the people have different opinions of what passive income really is, or what is passive and what's not passive.
So I think for me, like I'm quite comfortable calling passive income something like a buy to let, where maybe you'll hear something once every few months, but actually it ticks along. And or like the best case scenario for passive income, I would say, would be like a social housing type of contract where it's totally hands off. That's like the ultimate. Um, and then it kind of like the serviced accommodation stuff is quite passive, but it's not at all the same as something like a social housing contract on a buy to let. So yeah, that's sort of my idea of like heaven. Of
Mm.
passive income in terms of that. And I guess it is just that there's all different levels of it, and I guess it's what your appetite is.
Absolutely. So like I think there's a lot of people, mostly they just complain about what is passive and what's not passive, or some people might say or claim that passive is like an easy thing to like a get rich quick stuff. But like I think it's easy. Like, you know, this working income is something where you trade your time for the income and like
Hmm.
earn it that way. And like the passive thing, and another word that we use is like, you know, like a recurring or
Yeah.
residual income, because it's like, yeah, like even the HMOs and the studio service accommodation, more kind of goes into that, but it's still like a section of income that
Oh,
like
absolutely.
is almost like subscription. Like because I've built a couple of software companies, so on a subscription basis, it's like, you know, this is what our recurring income is going to be, whether it's on a monthly basis, it could be on an annual basis, whatever it may be. So I think our definitions are there or thereabouts. So you said you know, yeah, you know, you claim that you really love passive income. So
Mhm.
like what? So when you started learning about it, like
Yeah.
what happened? What kind of switch?
So so then I was like, so obviously, so cliche, Rich Dad Poor Dad. You read that book and you're like, and then it was like the really like upsetting moment of realizing as a singer, unless I turned into like Katy Perry and I had loads of like hits where I would get that reoccurring income because they're playing it like Mariah Carey every Christmas. And I'm like more theatre based, so not really like my bag. For me, it's like I'm in a production show. I've got to rock up, 2 shows a night forever if I want to earn my money. So it was quite, I was like, oh no, if I'm a singer forever, I've got to do this in my 60s. Like, no one's going to be paying to see me kicking my legs in my 60s, so it was quite a like eye-opening realization. And I've always wanted to earn loads of money. It's as simple as that. Like, it just, that's the way I've always been. I've wanted to earn lots of money, feel very secure, have a great life, have loads of like just do take take the things I want to do in life. Do you know what I mean? Travel and do all the things I want to do. So getting into property, basically, I went to a free Rich Dad Poor Dad 2-hour seminar thinking I was going to meet Robert Kiyosaki. Turned up in Leeds. Obviously, you wasn't there. And I went to network for Arbonne. That was the company that I was doing network marketing with. This is years ago now. This is like 8-9 years ago. Just with that mindset of like, these will be my people. I'll make some friends. I'll tell them about Arbonne. And then I got there and it was like an American guy literally just talking about property. And he was talking about buying property, but using other people's money. And from that moment, my life was changed because I'd never heard of it. I didn't know you could do it. And once I had that realization of like, oh, I could do that. And I didn't for a second think that I couldn't do it. I was literally like, he said I can do it. I'm just going to do it. So I signed up, as you do, paid all the money, did all the courses. So I spent all my life savings on property trading, which I don't regret for a second because I've got these skills, I've got this information, all this knowledge about property. And that, yeah, I didn't overthink it. It wasn't like I was a little girl and was like, I'm going to be a property investor. I just heard the information and it really excited me, and I just didn't look back. I just jumped at it, and every course I did just kind of spurred me on more and more. The more I learned, the more I was like, oh, this is it. This is the thing.
Awesome. So we're going to get into the details of the properties and like how you started, and you started with none of your own money,
Hmm.
so we're very similar there. But before we do, like, you're a mum as well, right? So like, where did this, when were the kids born? And like, was this something you were doing for them? Or because people are always kind of challenged by time, let's say,
Oh
how
yeah.
can I do it? And then the people say, oh, but I got kids. So like, how did that happen? And how did you keep going while being a mother?
Yeah, so at the time I was 28 and I was single when I started, so I didn't have children. Um, but actually, my greatest years of growth were when I was pregnant, because that was the fear I felt when I got pregnant was like, oh my god, this is real. Like I've got, I didn't know what to expect, and I was like, this has to be solid now. Like we can't play around with this. This needs to be solid. So my best years of building were from being pregnant to when my first son Grayson. I probably took 2 or 3 months off, and then I was out viewing properties with him literally strapped to me. And I think I bought 10 or 11 properties in the space of being pregnant to him being one. I was just at it because I had this like unbelievable strength and determination because of having a baby. Yeah, I'd say the majority of like my best things have been since having children, and there's definitely that, change when you have kids and your time is much more precious. But I think that's why I was so much more productive, because I didn't have loads of time. So the time I had, I just didn't overthink things. I was just quite militant with it, really.
Awesome. So like, you started purchasing properties with zero of your own money, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. So what was that like? Did you just hit the ground running and it was all seamless for you? Was there some challenges? Let us know how it was when you started.
Yeah, so when I started, my first 6 deals were with a joint venture partner, and it was someone that I didn't know that I actually met at a charity gala, like an evening event. And I went down to London from Blackpool, taking the Saturday night off work singing, got like far too excited, drank all the free Prosecco, and was basically going around with business cards, just being like, I'm from Blackpool and I can get amazing deals. And this guy phoned me the next day and he was like, can you actually get good deals? And I was like, yeah, no, I can. And he said, right, well, if you've got good deals, I'll finance them and we'll just split the profits 50-50. And I actually had 2 deals at the time that I needed financing. One was a HMO, 6-bed HMO, and the other was like a terraced house that had been converted into 5 flats. So we purchased those on a joint venture basis, and then carried on basically together, um, which was great because I was learning quick. But then the downside, I guess, to that was that he became my comfort blanket. So instead of like buying things on my own, I would just go straight to him rather than like sort of building more for myself. But yeah, that's how I got started.
Nice. And some people, it's good to hear this time and time again, because some people, they're like, no, not for me. Like, I'm never going to be able to find someone who's going to joint venture with me, who's going to want to lend me money in the beginning because I don't have any experience. Like, how many times I've heard that before from people. So to hear it time and time again is really good, because people are now going to be like, okay, every time they hear it, it's getting them closer to be like, yeah, just go out there. Tell people what you're doing, market what you're doing, document your journey, which is
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
what I did as well. And
I
yeah,
think people put blocks before they're even there. Like, I think people just say, "Oh no, like I can't raise the money," and then the first thing I say, "Well, is how many people have you asked?" And they say, "Oh, like 4," and I'm like, "4? What are you
exactly.
saying that for?" Like, that's not a thing. You can't just ask 4 people and be like, "Oh, it's not going to work." So I think people quit before they've even tried. They're so scared of rejection that they won't even like just ask. And
Yeah.
it's so much easier. Like I think the raising finance part is not the tricky part in property at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my experience of it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you got to drop enough stones in the water to create enough ripple effects and something happens. I think, I don't know what I'm going to sound like if I say this, like in this day and age, that makes me sound like I'm old or something. Yeah. In this day and age, like people, they don't have any patience. You know, they're like, oh, I made a phone call and, you know, the gold didn't drop into my lap, so it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or, you know, this is not the way, or it's not for me, or it's not going to happen. But I think it is also because people have been conditioned, taught for so long to do this, get paid that. You know, like the employee mindset.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with employees. I got loads of them. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with employees, but I'm just saying it's a certain mindset. It's like I'll only do this if I get that. You
Yeah.
know, I'll work for the month to get paid that, you know, money at the end of the month. Where in property, there are actions and work that has to be done, which on if you're looking for something physical, it's not going to be there. Like it's a little bit, it's invisible. Well, I say a little bit, it's not a little bit, it's invisible. So people's mindset is like, well, hold on a second, I'm a month in and I don't have a paycheck already. You know, so like it's the old conditioned mind. What advice would you have for people to help get over that?
I think I just think be realistic with it. I know it sounds boring. It's so boring to say that, but you do have to have that sort of, it is an entrepreneurial mindset where you put the work in now and you'll get paid forever, but you're not going to get paid right now. And it takes a lot of discipline. And certainly when I started, I reinvested all of my cash flow. I was very clear with what I was doing with it. And I would literally, my cash flow, I wouldn't touch it, and I would just constantly plow it into the next deals. And then I would have active income as well. I'd be sourcing deals, flipping, making sure that I had additional income that I would live a nice lifestyle off. But to me, it was like, especially using other people's money as well. I was very, I didn't take the cash flow until it was refinanced and I'd paid them back. So I think it's having that bigger vision and seeing the bigger picture of, yes, you might not get paid for if you're using other people's money. You might not get paid from that property for a year, but you're going to have that for the rest of your life, and you're going to have all the equity and all the growth and all the positives. So what's it going to look like in 10 years' time? So it's about you've got to brainwash yourself, really. Like I just listened to loads of audiobooks and brainwashed myself into just thinking this way, and it's normal to me now. Yeah.
And I like you say like the term brainwashed in a positive way, because at the end of the day, everybody is brainwashed.
And usually in a negative way. And it's like, well, you just have to take control of your own mind, stop watching all the stuff on the news, and just decide what you're putting in your brain. Is it positive? Is it gonna make your life better, or is it gonna make it worse?
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so you're going to be brainwashed anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So choose something good to be brainwashed with. But all of these things, I know how they can be addicted. I've been there. And if I'm not careful, I can see how easily I could slip back to watching all of these, programs and films that are like negatively impacting, like down and out. You know, there's a problem, everything's gonna fall to pieces. Or you can listen to like the Rich Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. We had Sharon Lecher, who was his business partner, co-founded Rich Dad Education, on here just a couple of weeks ago, and. So like you can either, as she also did, Outwitting the Devil, Think and Grow Rich for Women. So like we were talking about, like you got to listen, you got to read, and then you got to be around people who are going to reinforce all of these learnings, not rubbish it. Because
Yes.
it's so easy to be like, to jump onto something new and say, oh, what? There is a new way. I can make money. I can buy a property with none of my own money. And then it's so easy to just go say, did you know you could do that? And somebody like, you can't do that. And then you just quickly switch back to there. Yeah, you're right. You can't do that. Versus get around people who are like, oh, of course you can do it.
And the thing is, when you are around people that do what we do, it becomes the norm. So now, because most of my network are property investors that use or that regularly invest with other people's money, to me, when I meet someone that invests that doesn't do that, I'm like, oh, like, because that now is not normal for me. I'm like, what? You just use your own money? Boring. Like, because to me, that, real proper hardcore investors are constantly raising finance because you're always doing deals. Like, if you're busy, you're just constantly, raising finance to do property deals. That's the way that I see it.
Yeah, and it's a great way to get started because let's say you don't have enough money to put down as a deposit, the equity pay for the builds or whatever it is. Then there's so many. I mean, just yesterday we raised. This was at a training, right? So this was mostly just beginners or people who had a bit of education. We raised like 120K in 15 minutes.
Love
Yeah,
it.
which is actually quite low, compared to what we normally do. There was kind of less people there, and anyway, that was that. But like the way I see it is that can be one, it can get you started. But let's say you start making some money, just like I don't want to get into how you did it and how you built it and how you continued. When we started, we did like 7 deals all at once. One flip or one flip, 6 HMOs. And then when these start getting refinanced and money start dropping in, by then we'd already started the next round of deals. So then money starts coming in, and it's like, okay, so now we have enough money to do the type of deals that we're already doing using other people's money. But the way I saw it is, hold on a second, if we can put this money, if we can go raise even more money, then and put that then money together. So like we used none of our own money up until like 6 million. But as soon as we got to about 6 million, it's like, okay, let's start using our money, but let's go and put it into something larger now. So like it's okay saying now I've got the money to use my own deals, but I see it. I'm lazy, so I have to be accountable. So I'm accountable when I have to go and raise money, and now someone else's money's in the deal. I
Yes.
think if I was just doing it with mine, I'd be like, okay, it's okay if like that we lose that bit of margin or whatever. But when other people's money, I've got to stay accountable because I must pay them back. Like my record is over 100% actually of paying people back because we paid people more when things were delayed. So that's so important to just keep, even when you got the money. So let's say even if you had 1 million, well, now go raise 4 million, do something that requires 5 million. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. It makes you a really skilled, savvy investor when you're dealing with other people's money because you really do triple check your figures. Because you're so accountable. Because yeah, I really resonate with that.
And also borrowing from the bank.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people, they're like, oh, well, I raised this much money now, so I'm just going to buy it cash. And I've seen people buy, some houses cash. And I'm even thinking, like, imagine if we were able to raise, we got to raise like silly money at the minute, like private finance is nearly 3 million for a few different deals. And the money from the bank is like 10 million plus. And I just like sometimes I have these moments, like, I'm like, I wish the money would just drop in, and I just put it in. So it's less kind of hassle, less stress of like like the bank's demands.
The
But
remortgages and all the paper, all the faff that
yeah,
comes with
the development, the drawdowns, the fact that they're
it.
going to get the valuations, and like we're doing deals bigger than I ever done before. So I'm well out of my depth right now, and I've been open to everyone, the broker, the vendor, everybody. I'm like, this is a massive thing. We've never done this before, and what I realize is, valuations that normally costing us 1,500 quid is now going to cost us 15 grand. So it's not like it's not like we can mess about. But I have those moments where I'm like, oh, I wish I didn't have to do that. But then I remember and I think, look, they are making me better. Like the fact that I have to answer to these demands of the bank make me better and make the deal more secure because they're more experienced than most developers at making sure that they say, I want the deal to stack, especially over the last, let's say, where is it now? 10, 12 years with all the different things that have happened since 2008 and banks being over leveraged. They don't want to do that again.
That's right.
So, it seems like hassle. It's actually another team member, so to say, to make sure, yep, your deal's got to stack and it's got to be right. So I think that's absolutely amazing. Yeah. So tell us about, so you purchased over 30 properties in the last 7 years. You started with no money. Yeah. So you said you started out with a joint venture partner. So then you said it was your comfort blanket. So what was the switch? So what made you want to do it differently? And what did you do differently?
To be honest with you, it was we worked together about 2 years. I worked exclusively with this partner, and towards the back end, I started to realize. So we were doing HMOs, but the area that we were doing them, it was quite just quite unusual to do HMOs there. I'd got a bit overexcited because the first deal that came to me came from a distressed landlord. There was, well, he wasn't distressed, he was just selling actually, and the properties were estate. And they came through a leaflet campaign, and so I sort of fell into HMOs in the fact that an amazing deal just sort of dropped into my lap, and then from there I was like, oh, we'll just keep doing that, because I was finding these amazing, huge, really cheap properties, but the area actually isn't the best for HMO. So what had happened is I ended up working with a letting agent that was really negative, but she was the only one in the area that would manage HMOs, and I was running around like a blue-arsed fly. Just realised I swore. And doing a lot of work, and actually wasn't really getting that much money. And it was only after months and months and months and months and months I realised that I hadn't really understood the contract that I'd signed. And when I looked through the statements, I realised that he was kind of acting as a bridge and as a JV partner. So any money left in the deal, I was getting charged 12% a year interest on that money. And from the moment we completed, the whole time in refurb, I was getting, it was like when you're on a bridging loan, rolled up interest. So I wouldn't get paid until that interest was paid off. And it had taken months and months and months for me to finally work out what had happened. And by the time I did, I was like, oh, yeah, this isn't going to work. So that's 100% my fault, because I was so eager to get started. I was so green to business, so eager, just so happy to be, doing this, that I was literally like, yeah, sounds great. He's going to finance it, sign it, wasn't, because to me, I would make this excuse of, I'm a singer, I'm a performer, I'm not analytical, I don't understand, I don't understand these spreadsheets. And so I just put it off and put it off and put it off. And one day I was like, this isn't good enough. Like, you need to understand this stuff. And when I finally understood what was happening, I was like, no, I need to do this on my own, in my own name, or have full control, because everything was in his company. I didn't have a say on his company. I didn't see the statements. So I had no control, really. So at that point, I was, I just said, I don't think there's enough in this for two people. And he he bought me out, and I was really happy with that. And so I went off and started investing just completely on my own.
So was that then with your own money, or were you still raising?
Yeah. So at that point, I had a small amount, but not enough for me to be buying properties cash and refinancing. So the way I saw the pot that I had was money that I would leave in deals. So I still raised finance on every single deal, but my strategy was always to buy at least 50% return on investment. So the most I was ever really leaving in a deal was £5,000. So I would just the pot that I had, I would literally go, well, that five's going to be left in that deal, and this one's money in, money out, so that's fine. And this deal, I'm going to put, and I just divided it up, and was conscious about continually earning more as well alongside, but always raising finance to actually do the deals.
Yeah, so I think there's so many different strategies and so many different ways to make money. But I want to just go back to the fact that you said, okay, you were so eager just to get going, you did get going, but then you found out that, hey, like, you want to do things differently. Now, I think, I don't know what you feel about it, but like, I think that's such a good thing, because like, imagine if you'd have wanted to tackle, well, I must know all of this, and I must know how the spreadsheet works, and I must know every detail. Like, this is what I see stops most people from starting in the first place. Yeah, and I'm going to say it here because I want to say it as much as possible. So I started training for tennis in August 2022, and my aim is to win Wimbledon next year. Yeah, and everybody I tell, they just laugh. Yeah, but I just want to use this kind of exercise. We're going to film a documentary. Maybe Netflix will buy it. I don't know. especially, you know, if it happens, which I'm determined that it will. And the reason I want to do it is because I want to, like, I just came up with the idea. I was like, what stops people? Oh, when they tell them their goals, they don't dream big enough. If they tell someone their goals and they get laughed at, they'll kind of now not want to tell anyone else.
Mm.
And then when I started finding out what it takes, so there's only 128 people go into the Wimbledon in the men's singles, and like there's only 8 wild cards. There's 104 that go through international rankings. I've got to win tournaments and all of this stuff. And I was like, wow, then there's a lot. And then I caught my brain and I was like, oh, so this is what happens when people start business or people start property. They're like, oh, now it takes all this. Nah, give it a miss now. So I want to do this process just for that, because now I've found, by the way, tennis is so technical. I always heard that it's technical, but now I had some coaching, and my next coaching is tomorrow with a brand new coach who I've never coached with before. And I realized it's so technical. I heard it's technical, but now I realize it's technical. That's another reason why someone would stop in business, because like, oh, actually, it takes a little bit more than what I first thought, and they'll stop. So what is it that did you have any can you relate to that in your journey, that maybe like if you'd have knew that, you wouldn't have started?
Gosh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I did my training, I thought, oh well, that's it then. You just find a money in, money out deal, and then the bank just refinances it, and it was so simplified in my mind. And it's only once I was so deep in that I couldn't really then come back. So I'm quite glad that I didn't actually know the reality, because it would be paralyzing. So I think that every obstacle that I sort of came across, I was just learning on the job. And there've been so many times I've wanted to quit, so many times, especially at that point where, you know, I'd worked for 2 years to build this portfolio, which I was really proud of, to then basically walk away from it, and start again with nothing apart from, you know, a little bit of money that I'd been bought out with, but certainly not enough, you know, in terms of like, oh well, now I can retire. It was nothing like that. It was just sort of like, okay, well, so some breadcrumbs that I can, you know, go and sort of build off. But yeah, it's been hard over the years, but I think it just takes, you can have a bad day and, you know, feel like a real loser. I certainly did, you know, at points, but then get up the next day and be like, right, off we go again. And I think it's just the bouncing back, and I always bounced back because I had a big desire for it. And I sort of thought, well, if I'm not going to do this, what am I going to do? You can't quit everything. What if
Exactly.
like what? Then what? How embarrassing would that be?
Yeah,
You
and that's what I want to ask you, because on one side of the spectrum, it's like, okay, well, if I'd have knew that that was going to happen, maybe it wouldn't have started, and that's that so-called bad day you're talking about.
Mhm.
But then let me ask you, before you started any of the this property stuff and building that business, how many bad days did you have before of like, well, I can't continue doing what I'm doing?
Yeah, well, this is it. Like, and because I was still singing alongside doing this, because obviously I had to earn money, as well. I would really use that fire of, if I had a gig and, you know, I'm standing on stage, I'm looking at everyone's drunk and there's a fight, and I'm literally thinking, what am I doing? Why am I here at midnight with all these drunks? I actually hate this. That fire in my tummy, I would go, I am going to do property, and I would use it as a motivation to think I am worth more than this. And so that is the thing why I just could never quit, because I just had so much passion and fire inside me. I just couldn't allow myself to not do it.
Mm. And that's, I see and hear this a lot of, like what we're talking about here, which is the whole um, paralyzed from, what do they call it? And
Analysis paralysis.
yeah, that's it. Yeah. So
Mm.
they do that, and it's like, well, hold on a second. Like, if the being successful is difficult, then I know, definitely from my experience, being broke is difficult.
Yeah.
Like doing something every day for many hours where I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel is difficult. So
Mhm.
if that's difficult, but also success is being difficult, then which difficult you want to do?
Exactly. Choose your difficult.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
Totally agree.
but so most people, they need something major to happen in their life before they pay attention to it. There's a rare few that sit there and say, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make that decision. You know, most people have to be made redundant. Someone has to die. They have to be totally on their ass. So they've got the back is against the wall. They've got nothing to lose. You know, and I've been at different stages here or there. But now I see the old, you know, like the Donald Trump story, you know, of like, you know, he was a billionaire, lost it, built it back, and more, you know. And somebody once told me, they was like, could you imagine if like Donald was a millionaire? Or like if Donald was worth 50 million, he would think he was broke. That's broke to him. And it's like, that's where it landed. And I'm like, it's just, and that's when I realized there's no difference between £1 or 100 million pound, other than the way I view it. So like before, when I'm counting my pennies, and I used to save, I don't know if you remember the Grolsch bottle, you know, the Grolsch bottle with the kind of the lever that gets the lid on. I had a big one of these. Yeah, that I used to put pounds in because they were the only coin that really fit in. So I used to save my pounds, and I remember I had like £300 saving up. Now sometimes I make transactions that are like 30,000, 50,000, and I'm just like, there's no difference, just the way I viewed it then versus I view it now.
Yeah.
Because it's funny sometimes, you know, on your bank it says, you know, you say make the payment now, and depending on your bank, it'll depend what it says, but they'll say something along the lines of, are you comfortable with this payment? And sometimes it's a big payment, I'm like, no, I'm not comfortable with it. Should I tick no then? Yeah. But like it's just the way that somebody's looking at it.
Definitely. And I think when you're in property as well, it is just numbers, and you just get used to the numbers getting bigger. And I really noticed that around people that, you know, have jobs or live a certain way. And actually I was getting um the fire stuff installed in Empress Hall, you know, the extinguishers and stuff. And the guy that came to do them said, you know, do you want this type or this type? This type's more, this one's expensive. And I went, how expensive? Like what? And he said, £100. And I just thought, that's not expensive. But that's the difference in how you view money and what you're used to dealing with. When he said it was expensive, I thought it was going to say a couple of grand per, you know, when he was like 100 quid. And I was like, oh yeah, well, you know, just you do. It's how you view money and what you're used to dealing with, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. And more I realize these days, when somebody does say something like expensive, I'm like, yeah, but how much? Like, but you better tell me, because
what's your expensive versus my expensive can be totally different things.
And depending what we're investing in, by the way, if I'm investing in myself, like whether I'm investing in myself, coaching, mentoring, training, going to retreats, whatever it is I want to do to better myself, whether I'm investing in new staff, new equipment, whatever it is, I have switched from asking, well, how much does it cost, to thinking, how much is it going to make?
Yeah.
Because that's really what's important. And if anybody watching this, if the only thing that they take is like, you know, what you've been saying, Kristina, is like, change this view of money. Rather than how much is it going to cost me, how much is it actually going to make me, then actually decisions are made that make big difference. You know, I can't imagine. I'm like you. The first time I invested in or went to a training was an online webinar I spent $49 on, and I was sweating. I was thinking, man, like, is this for real? But like $49 at that time, I was willing, like, you know, let me do that. You know, I'm willing to do it. After years of like watching YouTube videos and trying to get stuff for free and borrow books off people rather than buy it myself, all of this stuff. And on that $49 webinar, I ended up buying $1,000 product. And I was just like, I thought I'd been hypnotized by some kind of frequency through the screen or something like that. I was like so scared. All my kind of background from growing up on a council estate started like, just like, have I been robbed? And even for a week later, I'm watching the videos. I'm like, is these videos even worth it? Like, could I get my money back? But that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it started to shift my thinking of like, well, it's like it's a $49 cost, it's $1,000 cost, to, well, actually, how much have I now made because like my learning curve just went whoosh and just changed the game, which is what obviously we're on here speaking to you about. So we're gonna just do a couple of quick fire questions now, because we're gonna wrap this up. As we're doing this live at 8 o'clock every Monday, we have our real life community mastermind. So anybody who's watching that here, I want to give them time to get ready for that. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, but I just want to wrap up with some of these questions.
Yeah.
So let's say, based on what we've just been talking about, this money, mindset and viewing money and getting started, because so many people are like, message me and they're like, Mark, one day I'm going to get into property. And I'm just thinking, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, what advice, first of all, do you have for anyone who's kind of thinking, yeah, I want to do something different. I want to grow. I want to learn. I want to make money in a different way. What advice do you have for them?
Honestly, I would say don't listen to that feeling in your gut, and you have to run with it. And you have to, I would say, don't overthink it. Get some education, 100%. And sometimes you really do need to jump and take that, to put yourself in a position where you tell people something where you're like, I am not going to be able to quit this because I've either A, told everybody that I know, so I now have to do this, or I have B, invested so much money in this that I now need to make it work. Sometimes I think you really just need to just to jump in. It's so painful. It's like pulling the plaster off slowly. If you're just in and out and tiptoe, nothing really happens. I think if you have that voice, you just have to really trust it and just go for it.
Beautiful. Thank you. So just to kind of wrap this up, and I've got one last question for you. But before I ask you that question, I just want to say, even in this short time, so much value, so much inspiration. What a great energy you have as well. Anyone who can just have an ounce of that energy to help them get going, that'd be very valuable for them. So thank you so much for coming on here. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So we have this saying in our community, and I want to ask you a question about it. So we always say that you're going to do the right thing for the right reason. Now, why is that?
Because, so this might be a bit of a hippie answer that I'm going to give, actually. I think if you're doing the right thing for the right reason, you're being congruent with yourself, so it will always come good. If you're doing something that's aligned with you, you'll stay on course, even if it goes a little bit wrong. Sometimes you'll get back onto it. If you're doing something for the wrong reason, I think eventually that will always come back and bite you on the bum, I think.
Fantastic. There you go. That's a crowd with a big round of applause. Hey, like I just want to say before I ask you a favor, what a great inspiration to women, mothers out there in business or not in business and want to get in business or want to have some control. So make sure you follow Kristina on the socials and ask any questions in here. If you're watching it on the replay, put a hashtag replay. If you're watching it live, put a hashtag live, just so we know if anyone's questions come up. But what we say, Kristina, in our community is you've got to do the right thing for the right reason, because it's the only way to discover your true potential. I always like to ask people what it is, right? So thank you for giving us that. But so we can add you to the reel.
Yeah.
Would I be able to ask you again and you say, because it's the only way to discover your true potential?
Absolutely. Oh gosh, I've got to remember that pressure, because it's what is it? Because it's the only way to discover your true potential.
There you go. You're like a natural.
Okay. Yeah, let's do
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So I'll ask you again. So hey, we have this saying in our community that you got to do the right thing for the right reason. Now, why is that?
Because it is the only way to discover your true potential.
Thank you so much. Powerful stuff. stuff on this Real Life Game Changers. Thank you for being here once again, Kristina. Thank you for everyone watching and listening in wherever or whatever platform you're doing that on. Do keep your feedback and your comments coming. And until next time, like Kristina said, you've got to do the right thing for the right reason, because it is the only way to discover your true potential. Thank you. Thank you.